Hey guys, how you doing? So I'll introduce myself. My name's Kelly Brockle, and this is probably going to be my first video actually of K&K Garage. So just got back from a night of racing, getting ready to unload the car, and we'll show you that, and I'll fill you in on a couple things of what it is, how it began, where it is now, and where it plans on going. And right now, let's get the car unloaded. Man, gonna be New Year's Eve tonight, and it's hot as hell out in Florida. So I want to get it inside, get the AC turned back on, and move forward from there. All right, we're back. We're in the garage. So got the AC going, trying to get it cooled off in here so it's comfortable. So a little brief background on this thing here. It's a 1987 Corvette, and I know what most of you are already saying. Oh my God, it's a Leroy copy. Listen, not taking nothing away from Garrett, or Cletus as he likes to call himself. Phenomenal work. This car was actually put together about a year and a half or so before he did his. This all stemmed from Hot Rod Magazine and then Roadkill Garage. So once I seen how these cars performed with a little work, I decided, hey, I want to go autocrossing. So the car was originally stripped down and set up for autocross. I bought this thing for $400 with no engine and put together a first gen small block for it, and nothing fancy at all. Just wanted to get out and be able to have some fun with it and see what the heck was going on. So with that being said, went out, had a hellacious first time with this thing. Put it in the grass within the first 20 feet. That prompted some major suspension overhauls, and I want to thank Mike Orgren. He did some unique stuff to get the car to work for me, and from there it was doing really well. The best thing about this car was when I would show up and the guys would come with their $100,000 new Corvettes, and this thing would absolutely just stomp them to death. So after a few years of that, got rid of the first gen small block, built a 5.3 LS, still with the 700 R4. Actually had a carburetor on it, and that made the car even better. Well, wasn't long after that, the racetrack close to my house, where I used to take the car to autocross, they closed it up on us. So that left me with a quandary of what to do with the car. So I decided, well, I'm going to put a nitrous kit on it, and I found a great deal on a set of wheels and slicks. Decided to go back to my roots and go drag racing. So that was a little bit of a mixed bag. We've had a bunch of issues with it, but with the independent rear and a 375 gear in it, I mean, the car was, 140, 60 foots. Got it down in the mid sixes in the eighth on the nitrous. And then, the nitrous has always been a pain in the ass. I ran it years and years ago. So I knew that I didn't want to stick with that, so we decided we're going to go turbo. So I had a first gen VS 78-75 cast wheel. Switched the car over to fuel injected with a Holley Terminator X. Still had a old style truck intake on it and throttle body, and we played around with the car a little bit and got it to go 627 at 118. So we went to Bradenton to actually run it in the eighth, or the quarter mile, I'm sorry. And after a couple failed attempts of getting it to run right for me, the thing went a 959 at 138. And that was out of gear at 1,000 foot, so the last 1320 was on the rev limiter. And it spun first and second. So the car showed tons of potential. But the factory rear end scared me to death, which is actually in this pile up here with another front end. So that prompted me to go ahead and make some changes to the car. So went over and did a solid axle swap in the rear using an 8.8 out of an 03 Mustang GT. And yes, believe it or not, it is standard width. It is like the same width almost exactly as what the Corvette IRS was. But switched it over to that. The car's running a turbo 400 in it now. So I had to end up making a custom transmission cross member and mount, and also in the back to locate the car, because of the way these are set up, it's kind of hard with a parallel 4-link to even get length enough to do a diagonal link bar. So this one here ended up getting a wishbone put on it and some Viking Crusaders. So last night was the first time back out in quite some time. So we now stepped up to a VS Racing Gen 2.5 billet wheel turbo, switched it over to a Trailblazer Super Sport intake and a 92mm throttle body. Basics of the engine: it is a Gen 3 5.3 liter. It has Summit Pro LS forged pistons and Gen 4 rods and a Summit Stage 2 turbo cam. Very basic, inexpensive stuff to go fast. But this time out, we had new turbo. It's the first time actually running on a drag radial. I normally run a Hoosier QuickTime Pro, which is more of a slick. So this was a learning experience. Getting the bars set up in the rear and the shock adjustments I'm battling with. That's going to be some time and effort to get that sorted out. I could not get the car to take the power right off the hit. It would just spin. And that was knocking all the RPM out of it, all the boost out of it, and it was still striking the tires. Once you got about 40-50 foot out though, she'd go like a bat out of hell. So that's new. So new rear end, all new settings. I'm starting from scratch on that, guys. Put a trans brake in the Turbo 400, set up a bump. I want to shout out to my boys Kyle and Justin for helping me out with the wiring on that, with the inputs and outputs with the Holly. And also running CO2 boost control. So that's something new as well. So this thing has been kind of a nightmare last night. And I don't think what's helping me much is it still has the 400 pound-inch springs in the front that I had for autocross. So I also made some homemade limiter straps out of an old racing harness, being unsure what this thing was going to do. If it hooked, was it going to yank the wheels? Because this is not an optimal setup, and it'll actually cause a gap between the collar and the shock mount itself. So I wanted to limit its travel. Be honest with you, I don't know if it hit him at all last night. I haven't seen any videos from outside the car. But that leads me over to, now these things here are 7-inch tall springs. So you can imagine this car was on the ground at one point. So now I've gone with a QAW 10-inch spring at a 300 pound rating. And I'm hoping with the extra length, this will get me where I need to be to allow a little bit of front end travel and rise on this thing, as well as getting the anti-squat figured out in the back. As it sits right now, it figures out to about 176%, which is pretty dramatic. I might actually have to curb that back a little bit. And if you're curious, I'm not exactly sure what the car weighs now. I weighed it once in autocross, but I'm sure it's put on some weight since then. I figure with me in it, it's right around 2,500 pounds. And just a brief overview of last night. You can kind of see the time slips here. So started out and didn't get a single good 60 foot all night. Like I said, this car should now, once sorted, 1.2s, I figure. But it was a consistent 1.4 second 60 foot car before. But mile an hour is still not too shabby, and that was trying to creep up on the CO2. And right now we're only running 14 or 15 pounds of boost to it and low timing. So I think my best run was actually the last one of the night here. So 60 foot, once again, horrible. 330, horrible. But it went a 6.3 at 118. So it is showing some promise, and it will get there. But that's a brief overview of the car. And today's project is going to be changing these springs out. And yeah, it's New Year's Eve today too, so nothing but the best. Keystone Light, man, gotta have the stones. So all right, I'm gonna get to it and get this thing up in the air. I'll give you a view of the underneath of the car, and I'll get cracking on some springs.